All right, so I thought that since the interest here is mostly on how do we shorten the timelines, I would this time talk a bit about strategy for that. Also because, of course, you guys have already seen all the wonderful stuff about how you get great EM data sets into NeuroGlancer and all the rest, so we don't have to go over that again. I do apologize in advance for my slides. I made them this morning, so whatever. Anyways, I wanted to get these key points across first of all, and maybe if we just stuck to that slide, that'd be enough. I want to get across that really the most important thing to do right now is to go beyond collecting data. So we really need to carry out system identification and some reconstruction. It's the only way to learn. You can't climb Mount Everest without learning how to go up some hills and do some mountain climbing. So you have to run into the actual problems. It's the only way you're going to find out even basic things like what do we need to get out of the data. So what do you need to collect? Can X-ray microscopy, can that work? Then there is priority number 2, which is doing the same sort of thing, including plasticity. We don't talk about that a lot. When you look at even some of the best work that's been done in trying to reconstruct circuits or neurons, or say, the hippocampal prosthesis with their completely different approach, they've stayed away from plasticity so far because it's just so difficult. Then very important, if you're going to do these two, is we need to have some metrics to verify performance and similarity. That's what you're going to need to know how well you're doing here and how to iterate, how to improve. Then we need to be able to constrain cumulative errors. You're going to make mistakes not just in data collection. Data collection is going to contain a lot of errors already. You're going to make mistakes when you do your parameter estimation. And you're going to have to figure out whether there are ways that some of these errors are already naturally constrained by, for example, the way that populations of neurons operate or the way that rhythms in the brain will suppress activity between different, say, onsets of activity of different patterns. So there are some homeostatic properties you'd like to learn about, but then maybe some ways to constrain cumulative errors in your processes as well, in your modeling. And then trying to escape the combinatorial explosion, which I'll say a little bit more about. I think the combinatorial explosion, so the problem here, the amount of work that you need to do, I'm not worried as much about acquiring data, collecting EM images. I know there are some longer predictions and some shorter predictions, but I'm not as worried about that. And I'm not too worried about running an emulation either, even though I think that Michael's presentation there was super interesting about the connectivity problem and all that. I'm not too worried about that. I'm worried about this problem of going from data to parameters. Trying to estimate what your parameters are and then doing that iterative process of actually ending up with something that runs and works. And you'll see in a second that that's going to be an exploding combinatorial problem unless we can figure out ways around that. It might also be useful to have a really quick look at just an overview of what we think the process is for getting to a whole brain emulation. I've shown this slide like a million times. Basically, you want to collect the data. You have some way in mind that you use that data, so maybe a compartmental model. You then want to validate what you've just built in order to so you need to collect validation data perhaps beforehand, possibly. That's one of the things I'm suggesting you may need to do in addition to preserving the brain. Then you're going to build your models, you're going to validate your models, and then I guess you've got uploading. Now, I also want to get into a little more detail here on that, which is, so when we say we want to do a whole brain emulation, what do we really mean? What is the criterion for success here? If you're looking at something really small and simple like a neuron, then perhaps your success criteria are something as simple as, okay, the real neuron, when it's given input, when you stimulate some of its dendrites, then you're going to get a certain set of spikes, or you're going to get a certain set of sub-threshold activity that you might be able to detect. But if you're going up further layers there, what are your success criteria for, say, a population of neurons? Maybe it's patterns that you're trying to find, or memories that are in engrams in the brain. If you go even higher, is it that those patterns are exactly the same, or is it that you want to be able to detect or experience the same sort of thing? What does that become at a cognitive level? What is it you're really trying to get at? So one of the things that we did not too long ago is we started getting a few groups of people together and asking them what the success criteria are. I'm not going to get into it right now, but we have a nice spreadsheet where we're putting it together, and it might be interesting to ask the group here as well. Because we've started collecting those, categorizing them, and then trying to understand how they apply at different levels of the modeling process. When you have your success criteria, then you can use that to come up with tests. Many success criteria are testable, others are not. There are some that are very subjective. When you have a battery of tests, then you can come out at least with a draft of some thresholds, some ideas of what might be your minimum acceptable emulation. When you have that, well, that helps you carry on. I would like to mention that even if you have a minimum acceptable emulation and that tells you something about the methodologies that are applicable, that might not be sufficient because some things, some methodologies may be great for your minimum, but they are dead ends when you're trying to get further, when you're trying to get to a mature system. All right, so that was about the success criteria. Now, let's say that we have some success criteria in mind. So we already have those here. We have a battery of tests. Now, at some level, maybe modeling a single neuron, we have an idea of how to select our model. So we've said, for instance, I think compartmental modeling is enough because I happen to have EM data sets. They seem really useful for that. So because I have EM data sets and I think compartmental modeling is great, my translation, this is this big translation problem that we talk about, from data to parameters is going to be about things like, well, so what are all the dendrites? How many components do I break them up into? Do I make small components, big compartments? Sorry, compartments, not components. And what are the membrane potentials? Sorry, what is membrane resistance, membrane capacitance here? What are the ion channels that we're going to find? And what are their response characteristics? All those things you're trying to extract from there. And you can get information that helps you get that data or get that translation going by knowing, for instance, where in the brain is your neuron? So how should I shift my likelihoods when I'm selecting from a distribution of potential parameter values based on the idea that, well, we're looking at these ion channels and not those ion channels, even if you couldn't detect everything by labeling your sample correctly. So you get some help from things like that, from where is your neuron, what is it connected to, what does the circuit look like that it's in, what circuit is it likely, how does that circuit normally work, how is it constrained? Then you take that and you can look at the performance of your neuron and you can validate that performance because you've collected some data beforehand and you can compare. Oh, I'm already there, oh my God. Okay, wow, this went fast. So anyways, once you get this done, you have some constraints that you can impose on there, so this helps you a little bit. Your success criteria determine whether or not what you just built is actually usable, how well it works. You carry out some judgment and you iteratively improve that. Now, it's not like you have just one way of building a model. You have a lot of different ways of building a model. You do model selection, you do parameter estimation. You probably have more than one optimum solution for any particular case. And then you have the same thing for your evolution, for plasticity. And this is at level 1. This is just a single neuron, right? Then you've got neurons in different regions of the brain, a little bit different, but you're working with them. You have all your data there and you're coming up with your models again. Then you can go to the next level and you can say, I can apply success criteria at the level of circuits. I can apply them at the level of populations. And, well, was that the, I thought I had one more there. No, I don't. Okay. So I guess I'm going to try to finish this up a bit faster than I had planned, but just a quick look at some state of the art. We haven't had much work yet on actually translating data into models. I'm going to skip over that. The combinatorial problem I was talking about is that you have a number of choices for your model selection. You have many different ways of doing parameter initialization and estimation. You have different approaches to doing plasticity. You have a lot of choices for your plasticity parameters. And you could come up with many more of these, right? This isn't the only set. But in general, if you're doing this and you don't know exactly how to get there, you have an explosion of possibilities. You can do all the computation. You can try to do the validation. You may not even have the validation data for it. How do you figure this out? And, well, I think there is an approach. There is a smart way of going about this. And it was great to hear Michael Skuharski talk about the C. elegans approach. I think you can maybe go one step back further, or maybe 2 steps back. The 2 steps back is start in silico. Why not develop fake neurons and fake networks. You know exactly what you're putting in. Pretend that this is real. So you're going to do it double blind. You have built your fake system. You know everything about it, but you give it to someone else. And they have to use your recording equipment with that, right? You can only get certain data. And then you do your emulation, but you have all the knowledge you need about that ground truth network. So you can go figure out your methods. Then you've got the next step, which is use cultured neurons. You know everything about those. You've grown them in a certain way. They may have paths that they already connect with other neurons in a way you know. You know what ion channels are in there. You've got your recordings. You've got your electron microscopy or optical microscopy. So again, you have a very quick iteration, and then you carry on in situ and to mammals and so forth. And I've completely run out of all time, so anyways, quick note that, of course, what I just showed you there, this sort of approach is exactly what we want to do. So we have a little project going on that hopefully will become a big project, and I'd love it if people can join us in that. So that's it for now.
Awesome, thank you. Thank you, Randall. I think I need to mention that there's some links to the projects from the Google Doc.
There are, yep.
And I think some QR codes as well. Okay, what's your challenge?
My challenge is to try to come up, actually I have two, can I have two challenges or just one?
You may have two.
Okay, because I really want to solve the problem of how to get useful validation data beyond data that is usable at, say, the single neuron level or then outside the huge black box. Okay. So how do you get validation data across scales? That's one really big challenge.
Bear with me. Across scales. I'm going to try to do it with guys. And number two?
Number two is any really smart genius ideas for escaping the combinatorial problem. You just want a fast way of finding the right solution for your modeling. You don't want to try all models and compare them.
Okay, all right, so two it is.
Sorry about that.
No, it's great. I mean, the more the better. We can always synthesize them back into smaller backup questions afterwards if it's useful and necessary. Okay, well, thank you, Randall. This was wonderful. Thanks a lot.